You're listening to the Spring Break Money Coach School, a special series from the Wander Wealthy podcast. My name is Tess. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I am so excited to welcome you to the Spring Break Money Coach School. This is a series of 13 episodes, which have been the most listened to and highly valued episodes from the Wander Wealthy podcast over the last 2 years. I have taken the time to make sure to put these episodes in a specific order for anyone who is either looking to refresh yourself on what's important about building a life-changing money coaching program, selling, marketing, and getting your money coaching business off of the ground and booked out, or for those who are brand new to the show and looking for some guidance. These are the episodes to listen to, and I would highly recommend, if you are not at the very first Spring Break Money Coach School episode in the series, scroll back on your podcast player and go start with the one that is sharing my story. That is the first one to tune into so you can see how it all goes down, what I'm all about, and what I bring as a money coach to this space. Now, while you're listening, just a little announcement. I am going on maternity leave in the fall of 2022, which means the Wealthy Coach Blueprint is not open for enrollment. So even if you hear me announce that in one of these episodes, I just want to let you know that we are not open for enrollment, but what you can do is get on the wait list for 2023 enrollment periods. In the meantime, I would definitely suggest for you to check out the pricing formula, which you can find at wanderwealthy.com/pricing. If you're struggling with pricing your services and not really sure what a package would look like and how you would price a coaching package, that is the guidebook, calculator, and little mini trainings that you need to get that all sorted out. Another way that we can quote unquote work together with a wink is by you getting access to the Client Attraction Content Matrix. This is a quick mini course that's going to teach you my secret sauce to creating content that converts. Whether you want to create TikToks or Instagram Reels, stories, posts, videos, even for YouTube or podcast episodes, even blog posts, this matrix is going to change your business. Because when it comes to creating content, you need to make sure that you're creating content that speaks to your audience and then gets them to turn into paying clients. So you can get access to that by heading to wanderwealthy.com/content. And if you want a very special deal, get your hands on the pricing formula first, and you might just get a very special discount to the matrix, as well as a special treat in between that teaches you all about my simple sales strategy. So wanderwealthy.com/pricing to get your hands on the formula, and wanderwealthy.com/content if you're just interested in the content matrix. And those are some ways that we can continue to work together over the next handful of months. Thanks again for tuning in to the Spring Break Money Coach School. Now, without further ado, let's get into this week's episode for this amazing series. Hello. Welcome back, all of my friends and listeners out there, to the Wander Wealthy podcast. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, a warm welcome to you. My name is Tess. I am the host of this show, founder of Wander Wealthy, and business coach to the money coaches, financial coaches, and wealth coaches of the world. We, at this podcast, we like to talk about business, marketing, sales, coaching specifically, and even more specifically, the coaching of people on their money and the making of it and the managing of it and all the things in between. And my goal is to bring you some helpful tips, helpful things to think about, some stories, some personal experiences, and just overall how to and why to build a successful money coaching business for yourself, whether you want that to be a full-time business or part-time side hustle, just to bring in some extra cash, doing something really awesome and life-changing for your clients, then this is the perfect place for you to be today. Now, this week, I'm going to be sharing a peek into my content creation routine. A big part of marketing our businesses, and especially if you have an online coaching business, then a big part about marketing it is also doing so online and using some form of content marketing. A lot of people don't know this, but when you're, whether you're planning to use social media or you have a blog or a podcast or a YouTube channel, you are creating content. And if you're creating content with the purpose to sell something and market your brand, then you are doing content marketing. So there are some specific things to know about content marketing, which, lucky for you, I've already created an amazing podcast episode all about it. And it is I actually have a couple. Episode 204, which talks about the content strategy for your money coaching business. And you could also check out episode 231, how to create 180 content ideas this weekend, which leads me to this week's sponsor, which is the Client Attraction Content Matrix. Now, here's what this whole thing is. The Client Attraction Content Matrix is basically a mini course, but what you're really getting when you sign up for this mini course, which I make it super easy for you to go through in like a weekend or less, but what you really get from it are some awesome tools to help make content marketing in your business so much easier. So you will get education, which is really important from my perspective when it comes to, learning certain things for your business. You'll get the education around mastering the buyer's journey, discovering your content pillars, and how to write and create content for your ideal clients. But you're also going to get my proprietary tool, which is the content matrix itself, and it helps you create over 180 content ideas, but not just any kind of content ideas that are going to resonate at a deep level with your ideal clients. And because you're going to be learning the full content strategy that goes on behind the matrix, that goes on, in the back end, and when you make sense of that, that's where that resonating content comes from. So 180 content ideas that you could also create in the matter of just a few hours. So if you're ever feeling stumped for content, or you're feeling really uninspired, or just having a hard time, maybe you're creating content right now, but it's not clicking with your audience, then the Client Attraction Content Matrix is going to be a game changer for your business. On top of the matrix itself and the education that you're getting, I'm also offering a bunch of helpful tools as bonuses that are really going to help you just streamline all of your content creation. So learning about how to tell your story in a compelling way, to a full copywriting boot camp, plus 160 money coaching content prompts that I spent hours creating just for you. And those prompts can also fit within your content matrix, and you can kind of combine the two to make them really, really powerful. So the Client Attraction Content Matrix is amazing. It's something that we include inside of the Wealthy Coach Blueprint, but you can get it without joining the Blueprint. Of course, I'd love for you to join the Blueprint someday. And right now, we do have a waitlist. So if you want to join the Blueprint, you can head to wanderwealthy.com/apply and get yourself on the waitlist. But you can get into the Content Matrix now and really starting to learn about my secrets of how I generate content. And I'm obviously going to be referring to it in this week's episode. So that's a big reason why it is also today's sponsor. So if you want to learn more, and if you just want to get your hands on it, head to wanderwealthy.com/content. If you want a sneaky discount, it does require to purchase a couple of other items. But if you do want to get kind of like a package deal, then go check out the pricing formula, which is at wanderwealthy.com/pricing. And when you go through and purchase the pricing formula, you're offered a really, really stinking good deal on the content matrix. But if you just want the content matrix and you're ready to get that, head to wanderwealthy.com/content. All right, let's dive into today's topic, which is sharing my content creation routine. So obviously I use my own tool to really help me create my content ideas and, help me create content in an easy and, low resistance manner. And I think a lot of us deal with a lot of resistance when it comes to creating content because of all the pressure that we just put on ourselves. So I think I want to talk about that first before I really walk you through my routine per se, is just that, yes, there is an approach. There can be a strategy to creating content, but so many of us, we get into perfectionism, to be honest, when it comes to creating content, that even if we know the strategy, if we know, how to write a compelling piece using, different copywriting formulas, if we know that we can almost get too in our head and keep ourselves from even taking the first step. So my best tip for you there is sometimes you just need to get into the groove of writing. And if you want to write good content, you have to take that pressure off. And I know that it sounds easier said than done, and it is easier said than done because we all just have our own ways of putting pressure on ourselves. But if you can just take a moment to be like, okay, I'm not going to write for my platform right now. I just need to sit down and write just to start writing. Truthfully, getting started is the hardest part. It's, what they talk about with writer's block is okay, just sit down and start writing. I have no idea what to write right now. One of my amazing clients brought this up in a recent coaching call, and she mentioned that it was originally said by, I believe it was originally said, if I'm remembering correctly, by Seth Godin. And he talks about, people don't get talker's block. So why do we get writer's block? And this is fascinating because before she had shared that with me, one of the tips I shared with her, right, instead of maybe sitting down and writing I don't know what to write, or just getting the ball rolling that way, another tip that I have is to just start talking. If you have an idea, or if you're trying to talk or work through an idea to get something where you can actually take it from your brain and actually have it in written form that is a form that's postable, just start talking. But turn on and usually you're gonna go to your phone for this, turn on the voice notes app, or download an app that allows you to record your voice and just start recording yourself kind of talking through this idea. Because then she mentioned, we don't get talker's block, but we often get writer's block. So sometimes it's just, we need to verbalize what's happening in our head, and then that can start getting that ball rolling. And then we can take it from a voice note and just start to transcribe it into a written form. So that's on one hand. I think another one is a lot of people just make this whole process so much bigger than it is that they don't even allow themselves to sit down and start. So even before they allow themselves to get writer's block, they get starter's block. They get put this in my calendar block. And, it's because if you've sat down to write something and it's taken you hours just to get one post out, then it makes you not want to do it anymore, or it makes you think, I need an entire day to commit to this. And it becomes harder and harder and harder to write efficiently and concisely because we've made it a bigger thing than we've allowed. So my best advice there is, okay, let's start practicing writing more efficiently by, give yourself 1 to 2 hours only. I would say even start smaller, start with 30 minutes to an hour. Give yourself that time and then set a goal just to get one post idea or one post fully written, or, and of course, this is whatever you are planning to write, whether it's just a quick social media post, or it's a TikTok video, or it's a full, actual YouTube video or podcast or whatever. But just set a very, very small goal that you can attain in that 30 minutes or, maximum an hour. And I know that this seems okay, that's a long time for me to be committing just to one post, but we have to start somewhere. And when you put the pressure on yourself to go, okay, I'm going to write 5 posts in this next hour, and then you hardly make it through one, that's when we start to get disappointed and discouraged. And then we don't want to sit down and even commit to another chunk of time of doing this because we're it takes me forever to do it. So that's why I say, okay, just make those tasks even smaller and then commit to that. And I think another thing, which I'm going to be sharing now as I kind of step into my content creation routine, is to actually break up different parts of the task. So if you think about what it takes to write, we'll say one post on social media, just like from start to finish, there is the ideation component. Then there's taking that idea, that topic, that prompt, and pulling it into an outline or just getting an idea of like all the pieces of the post that you want to make sure that you're touching on. Then there's the storytelling component where you're filling in all the gaps of that outline. And then there's, of course, posting it. And then most likely, and this happens with almost every type of content, there's also a creative visual element, whether that's a photo that you're using, just a view, or that's, you're doing like a carousel kind of graphic post, or even just a standalone graphic post. Maybe this is actually a post for TikTok or Instagram Reels, and you're creating the video component as well. And then again, if this is actually a podcast, it's taking that and actually recording the content, and then also adding the creative behind that, which is going to be usually like some sort of graphic that you're going to use to promote it. And then if it's a video, there's the whole video part, and then a thumbnail and all of that good stuff. So there's a lot that goes into a full kind of start to finish post, which is why I actually suggest breaking up those pieces so that you don't have to be what I call, or what is known, I didn't come up with this, but what is known as context switching. Because when you are going from kind of the strategy of coming up with the prompts and making sure that it makes sense for your ideal clients and you understand kind of the strategy behind it, that's like one part of your brain. Then when you take those prompts and start to ideate what the outline of that post is going to be like, and kind of what you want that headline to be, and what the key points are going to be, and then what your call to action is going to be, that's another part of the brain. And then when you're taking that and you're adding the story behind it, that's another part which requires you to really go, now we've gone from like very, very strategic to creative storytelling and filling in those gaps of the outline. And then finally, when you do the visual element, that can be like, that can feel, at least, I don't know if any of this is scientifically like different parts of the brain, I'll be honest, but for me, like creating a graphic is very, very different, even from storytelling when it comes to creative writing. So creative visuals are very different for me than creative writing, because I am traditionally a very analytical person, and then I have a creative side, but it's less visual, and it's more, it's more with my words, I suppose, which is why I would have a podcast. But being able to break those things up actually helps me make faster progress and stay focused and kind of in the zone and in that specific part of my brain that I need to be in without context switching. I keep mixing my words when I say that. But when you context switch, you typically interrupt yourself, and that interruption, right? Because you have to switch from one part of the brain to another. That interruption can cause you to lose actual time. If you're And as an example, even like in the physical world, like beyond just what's happening in your brain from a microscopic level, when you think about the physical world, if you are going from, okay, I wrote the post and now I need to figure out what kind of graphic is going to go with it. Or maybe you come up with the prompt and then you decide whether you're going to create a graphic or not. Maybe you create the graphic before you write the post, but you come up with the prompt and then you go do the graphic. Well, maybe you go and look, online for inspiration, then you fall down a little bit of a rabbit hole, right? So there's time wasters in there that can really pull you away from the task at hand. And that is typically what can cause you to lose a lot of time and cause you to take, a full hour to 2 hours just to do one post, because we aren't actually using and leveraging the fact that context switching is harmful, and how can we do this differently? So let me share with you basically how I keep myself from context switching and wasting a lot of time, and how I've kind of found a way to streamline content creation and, really decrease the number of hours that I'm spending marketing my business and my offerings. And this gets us into my content creation routine officially. So if you've stuck around, thank you so much. But this is going to be where, we kind of breeze through things. So when I create my content creation routine, I think the first thing you might want to know is how I typically organize my week as a full-time money coach. And I actually have an episode dedicated to that, episode 170. So you can absolutely go check that out to learn about maker manager time and how I theme my weeks, and then go further and kind of batch my parts of the themes of the day. And that will kind of explain when I'm committed to content creation and when I'm committed to creating content within my program or program development, when I'm committed to delivering to my clients and administrative work and all that good stuff. But once you check that out, then once we get into it, I'm kind of zooming out from just a weekly perspective, and I'm really looking at how I approach creating any piece of content. So I have two platforms. I think this is another thing I need to preface. I have two platforms that I use and have mastered for my marketing. And obviously the first one is this podcast. And then the second one is a social platform that helps drive traffic to the podcast or drive podcast listeners to a place where we can connect. And that is Instagram. But I also post tons and tons of content there and offer lots of free trainings and value there as well. And so they are kind of two content platforms that live alone but interact with each other quite often. And I always recommend to my clients to start with one platform. And usually I recommend to start with a social media platform because it's the easiest way to have, communication that goes both ways between you and your audience members. And you can actually connect and follow them just like they're connecting and following you. So it's a much easier way to create community faster and to have it all right there on one platform versus like having a podcast and then having to drive people to another place in order to interact with you or partake in a community with you, or drive them to an email list where then you don't know if they're really receiving your emails or not. And you're less likely to have back and forth communication that way versus on a social media platform. So again, I'm all about selecting and starting with one platform, and usually that's one of the many social media platforms, so you can really master that first and foremost. But what I do for my two platforms, because I've gotten to a point where I have mastered one and has also moved on to a second one, and I found that it feels now I'm able to manage both at the same time, I suppose, is I have a monthly kind of plan first and foremost. So monthly I'll sit down, and usually this is kind of like the week before or 2 weeks before the end of the month. So like midway through the month prior. So as an example, we are like in the last days of September as I'm recording this, and October is next month. So I have technically, and when you listen to this, we will be in October, by the way. But I have technically, I think like mid-September is when I sat down to ideate all of my podcast topics for the month of October. And then I've actually So I have a day where I kind of sit down and I brainstorm all of those topics. And sometimes that requires me to go out and do some research, ask my clients or my audience what they're interested in hearing, revisit my market research. There's lots of different ways to come up with ideas. And so that's a certain part of the brain. So I make sure that I actually use one of my content creation days, which are typically Monday mornings and Friday mornings, although now I'm trying to work less on Fridays. So it's kind of moved into one of the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, mornings of the week. But I typically will sit down and I will just ideate what am I going to talk about and what's really going to resonate with my ideal clients. Then if I have time, I'll take the next step. So that's kind of a batch. Like I'll batch my podcast creation, but when I say batch, I'll like time block my on my calendar, let's say that's Monday, mid-September, I'm time blocking out about 1 to 2 hours on my calendar for ideation of the podcast, every single episode that's going to go live in October. Okay. And if I have time in there, I'll move on to batching the notes as well. So when I say batching, what I'm doing is I'm batching the ideation or the podcast topics. I batch them. I do all 4 podcast episodes that are going live in October. I batch those topic ideas. And then again, if that doesn't take the full, let's say 2-hour time block that I have set for myself, I will then move on to batching the notes for those podcast topics. If I don't have time, then that will go into my next kind of morning content creation time block that I might set for myself. But I think what's really important is to make sure, even if you have time blocked off in your calendar, to actually write down what you want to accomplish within that time. So for me, I would write down that I want to accomplish coming up with 4 podcast topic ideas. And I might even break it up and go, okay, I need an idea for episode 240, episode 241, episode 242, and episode 243. And I would have them, set as separate tasks. But my goal is to get through all of those topic ideas in that time frame. And then maybe in the later part of the week, when I have another time block for notes batching, I will have a similar kind of thing, a task set up for each of those podcast episodes, and just to write the notes for them. And that's, if going back to kind of what I was saying earlier, that's where I'm outlining things, and I'm really just kind of putting down the key items that I want to talk about, and what my calls to action are going to be in the podcast episodes, and so on and so forth. Now, like I said, if I get my idea batching, the topic batching done, I will bring those notes batching into the time block for Monday, and I'll get as far as I can. If I don't get to them, that's okay. They're in the next time I'm doing content creation. But I'm doing this typically once a month, typically midway through the month prior to the month where those podcasts are going to be going live. Okay, so that's the podcast. Now, on a monthly schedule, when it comes to social media, what I will typically do is I'll look at my marketing plan, which includes my content matrix. And typically, I've already kind of ideated all of the things that I want to, eventually pull in as post topics, as an example. But if I, feel like I should set aside 30 minutes just to continue ideating some more kind of content topic ideas in my content matrix, I might do something like that on a monthly basis. But what I'll also do is I'll take all of these ideated ideas that I've either done months prior or, maybe just recently did, and I'll start to pull them into my social media content calendar for the month. So basically this week at the last week of September is when I'll start to ideate my ideas for October. I don't get too far ahead in my content planning and batching when it comes to social media because I just feel, really good about kind of keeping a sustainable, kind of livable schedule, and I don't overcommit to too many posts. Now, for those who are really committing to 3 posts a week or 5 or 7 posts a day, a week, or even more, don't listen to anyone who says that you have to post twice a day in order to, get the most money or have a successful business, because that's not the case. Growing your followers does not equal money in the bank. So that's just a little side note. But for me, I post, about once a week, and I try to stay as consistent as possible. But I do ebb and flow in seasons. Although I always recommend when you're first starting out, trying to gain that traction, or maybe when you've lost your pace a little bit and you want to get back in the game and kind of get that traction back up again, then find a consistent schedule where you can stick to it. But what I will do is last week of the month, I will sit down and I will pull some content ideas into my calendar and start to fill up the calendar for the month looking ahead. Okay. So those are the 2 things I do on a monthly basis. And I will just find time in my weekly schedule where I have the themes, and it's always in the morning during my maker time, but the themed days that are dedicated to content, and I will time block when I'm going to be working on that content. I never do more than 2 hours for any given time block, because your brain needs a break. But I will time block that out, and then I will figure out what specifically I need to accomplish. And so on a monthly basis, midway through the month, and then the final week of the month, I know that I'm doing this like monthly planning for the month after, the next month, the following month. How many times can I say month? Then I move on to kind of a bi-weekly schedule. So now that I already know like what I'm talking about for my podcast and the general overarching topic of social media, it's pretty smooth sailing from there. So on a bi-weekly basis, I might start pre-recording my podcast episodes. So right now I am in the final week of September, and I am kind of doing a batch recording session. So I've time blocked it out, and my goal is to complete 2 podcast episodes, which will actually go live next week, October 7th, when this podcast goes live, and the week after, which will be episode 241, which is not, if you're listening to this on October 7th, it's not out yet, but it will be out. Or, it's the next episode basically. So I'm going to pre-record them this week to, get myself kind of ahead. Another thing I might do, and this is like its own dedicated time block for batching, might be to go out and take photos so that I have photos to post on social media or photos to use for my podcast graphics. And usually I use the photos that I take, I use for both. Or I might go out and just like grab and source old photos to be able to use as podcast graphic, or rarely I use those for social media, but sometimes I might. And honestly, if you don't have photos, like new photos right now, that's okay. I like recycle photos all the time. And I also do my own photo shoots. So sometimes it's just like, again, blocking out time to do a little photo shoot. I did that this morning. I blocked out some time and I did a little photo shoot with myself because I liked my outfit that I was wearing today. And I just try to do that, when I get a moment. Another thing that I'll do kind of on a bi-weekly basis when it comes to social media. So, for me, it's Instagram. And aside from getting just photos that I can post on my feed and use as, story backgrounds or whatever, I also will look at, okay, how can I use those photos for my social media, but also going out and creating the graphics. So that is a total other part of my brain that is required, like I had mentioned before. And so actually having a time to sit down and go, okay, I know what I'm talking about in this month. What of these posts do I want to make like as a graphic versus just have it be a photo and then have myself kind of talk about the post? And so I will make that decision, and then I'll take time to actually go and create the graphic. But you can see that I'm not doing like a full start to finish post during this time. I'm really just focusing on the few things that I need to do. And so maybe I take a look at my calendar and I go, okay, I am posting 10 times this month. Half of them are going to be graphics, half of them are going to be photos. And then I'll go through and kind of determine, which ones are going to be graphics. And then my goal for that time block will be to complete the graphics of those 5 posts. Another thing I'll do on a bi-weekly basis, and all of these things that I'm sharing, I have kind of 4 things. Pre-record the episodes, that gets its own time block. Take photos or go source old photos, that gets its own time block. Get the social media graphics or photos for my social media posts, that gets its own time block. And then taking those social media topics and starting to create the outlines, that typically gets its own time block. So obviously, I probably can't complete all of this stuff in 1 week. Of course, it depends on how long it takes me, but knowing that I typically have 2 content creation themed mornings a week, this thing that happens on a bi-weekly basis will typically get spread out because I also have weekly commitments as well. And then we have to find place to put in those monthly time blocks. So, obviously these things get mixed around, but they're happening still on kind of a regular recurring schedule. And that's what allows me to be as consistent as possible. And the one thing that I've always been consistent on has been this podcast. And that's one thing that that's how I'm able to do it is I batch ideate, and then I batch the notes, and then I batch record, and I batch getting the photos for those the recordings, and none of it I ever do from start to finish. It has been many years since I was like, oh my gosh, I have to put a podcast up tomorrow. Let me do the whole thing start to finish today. And when I used to do that, it used to take me hours. So I bi-weekly pre-record episodes, take photos or grab old photos, social media graphics or source the photos that I probably took for the podcast, and then write those social media outlines. And outlines are really just like, what's the header going to be? Do I have a hook that I can put in here, or think about a hook right now? If not, I move on. What are the key points I need to make in this post? And then what's the call to action going to be? And I use Planoly to plan out my Instagram posts, but I know there's plenty of other great social media planning tools and software. And also, like, I could easily use the content matrix and make do, but because I've paid for Planoly for a long time, and I like the way I can kind of look at how my feed is going to look, which is ridiculous because it doesn't even matter. I will use Planoly to kind of start on the outlines and then take it that next step, which is what I do on more of a weekly basis, which is where I might have to continue with the social media outlines if I honestly don't get to it on by like 2 weeks ahead of time. And I will also then take that post, now that I already have the graphic, right? I have the outline, and I'll just start filling in the gaps from a storytelling perspective. And I'll kind of finish it off, and I'll try to get, my posts finished off during one content themed morning where I've time blocked for writing my social media posts. And I'll specifically go, okay, write post for today, write post for Wednesday, write post for Friday, if that's my, how I'm posting, if that's my posting schedule. And then again, I already have the graphics done. So all I have to do is write, pair it with the graphic, and schedule it or post it in that moment if I'm writing the post for today. But ideally, I want to get through all the posts for that week at the start of the week, or even the week before, and get 1 week ahead when it comes to that, which you could easily do by kind of slowly getting into that routine. But that is it, honestly. I know that it sounds, or maybe to you, it could sound easier said than done, but I would have no energy to create content if I put the pressure on myself to sit down and go start to finish in that moment. So being able to break up those tasks into their different kind of contexts, and then have a routine of what I need to do and when I need to do it, and know that, okay, if it's one of those monthly tasks, it's like, all I have to do today is come up with 4 podcast topic ideas. I could do that. And then on a bi-weekly basis, it's like, all I have to do today for content is pre-record 2 episodes. I could do that. And then next week I'll pre-record another 2 episodes. Or maybe I get ahead and I pre-record 3 episodes because I'm going, a little wild and having fun with it. But anything that I do, I don't put that pressure to create the full thing, because I think that really tasks your creativity. And that also sometimes, like, taking that pressure off allows me to actually create a lot more and get even further ahead. So make your tasks like very, very doable by breaking them up and then just scheduling them in your calendar. A little trick that I've learned is that you can, this is for Google Calendar. Obviously you can like time block. So I time block full 2 hours and I'll say, okay, podcast work. But that's not it, right? If you time block for podcast work and then and that's for tomorrow, and then you get to tomorrow at 9 a.m. and you're like, okay, I got to do podcast work, but like, what do I do? Then you're not going to feel very motivated, and you're also going to be a little bit confused. So what you want to do is you want to block out those, let's say it's 2 hours, but then, okay, you got to work on the podcast, but what specifically do you have to do? For me, it's complete episode 240. And I have a task related to that. And on Google Calendar, after you create the event of blocking that time, you can then go in and click, and right below the name of the event, you can actually toggle it to a task. And then that task will show up on your calendar, and you'll see that the task is to for me, it's complete episode 240. And then the other task during this block is to complete recording episode 241. How easy is that? And how much better is that for you when you wake up, 9 a.m. rolls around, your alarm goes off to tell you, oh, I'm now entering my time block of podcast work. But then another alarm goes off to tell you, your task of completing the recording of episode 240 is due, right? You got to do this task now. Like, that allows you to take all this time that we have in the world that we think, okay, if I quit my job and I can do this full time, I'm going to have all the time in the world, or I'm going to work on my business over the weekend. I have all the time in the world, but then we get nothing done. It's because we don't have concrete tasks that we commit to ourselves to finish. So add that little kind of additional item in there, and I think it's really going to change things for you. So that's how I am able to create content without feeling all the pressure. And it's not like a morning routine. It's not a daily routine of content creation. It's truly like a calendar routine. It's a schedule routine. It's honestly a monthly routine that gets broken down into weekly, bi-monthly, and monthly tasks that I calendar out and I commit to. I show up and I make it happen. So please steal this routine from me. Let me know how it goes. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them over on Instagram. I am at Tess_Wicks. You can send me a message. I promise it's super normal. I get questions and messages all the time. And I love hearing from all of the listeners out there because I cannot see your lovely face. I don't know how to thank you and talk to you unless you come talk to me. So come over to Instagram, again, at Tess_Wicks, and just share the love. Tell me what you're working on. Let me know what questions you have, what I can offer you. Maybe I'll turn it into a podcast episode. The last thing is that in order to make your content creation easier, you got to get your hands on the content matrix. It will truly change the game for you. No matter if you're trying to create social media content or podcast content or whatever it is, the content matrix is the tool that I use to come up with ideas for my podcast and my social media and my, and then within my social media, like my reels, my posts, my stories, all of it. And you can use it to just apply across the board. So wanderwealthy.com/content to get that, or if you want the sneaky bundled price, go to wanderwealthy.com/pricing and grab the pricing formula, and then you can also get the special price for the content matrix. All right, that is it for the show notes of this week's episode. Head to wanderwealthypodcast.com/podcast/episode 240. And until next time, I hope you wander wealthy.